Today on Quiet Arena Podcast,
a healing process for me, no longer me running
Jonathan
away.
Trull.
Regardless of what room you're in, you need to step up as the leader that you could be.
He said, study the greats and then become greater. I was like, wow, that's a different mentality.
What am I doing? Who am I? I remember that first year, it was very hard for me to even watch a game of football. Okay, that's gone.
The best way to deal with the problems that we have can be to help others deal with their problems.
Taking advantage of those moments and in those moments, not only broaden your opportunities later in life, but use that.
The stadium is loud, the lights are bright, the crowd is cheering.
Rumor has it, I'm a savage, drop the classic, thinking back.
But every athlete eventually has to answer one question. What happens next? Because when the arena goes quiet, the real game begins. Welcome to Quiet Arena.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is your man, Tony the Tycoon, and I am excited, as always. Anytime that we have guests on, I'm excited. Why? Because they could be doing a multitude of things, and they have been so gracious with their time. So with our guest here today, I want to read him in. So today's guest is someone whose story was built through patience, discipline, and earning every step. Jonathan Trull came out of Charlotte Christian, walked on at the University of North Carolina, and worked his way into meaningful playing time on the offensive line. There were no hypes, no shortcuts, just development, consistency, and doing the work when nobody was watching. But like every athlete, there comes a moment when the game changes, and you have to figure out who you are beyond the locker room. Jonathan took that same walk-on mindset into life after football, building a professional path in business and sales while staying connected to faith, relationships, and the athlete world. This conversation is about identity, transition, discipline, and what it means to keep building after the game gets quiet. So Jonathan, man, I appreciate you for being here, brother. Thank you.
Tony, I can't thank you enough for having me come on. It's been incredible watching you build not only this podcast, but everything you're doing post your game too. So I'm excited to get into it a little bit and share a little bit about my story.
Man, I love it. Well, look, let's jump into it, man. So look, you went from Charlotte Christian to UNC. And you earned it. And I always tell people this all the time. Like if you've never gone through the walk-on journey, then you truly don't understand what it means to have a passion for what it is that you do, right? Because although as you build up your reputation in that space within the locker room of the individuals that are there, your peers, right? They appreciate everything that you've done. But now it's about not just that. You got to be able to gain the eye of the coaches just to get that kind of opportunity that you got. So let's talk about like earning your way into real playing time and then building life beyond football and business and sales. When you look at that journey now, what does that represent for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've looked back on it and I credit my journey through football and how I got to North Carolina and how I got to where I am today in my career. It all goes back to my journey within football, right? And it's about the brotherhoods that I built along the way, the coaches that really, poured into me during that time and really set me up to be who I was going to be. Out of high school, I had a great high school career. We won back-to-back state championships. We had a great team, and I took a chance rather than taking a smaller scholarship offer at a smaller school. North Carolina was always my dream, and they offered me the opportunity to walk on for Carolina, and I had to take that chance on myself, and go to Carolina, and then ultimately prove myself to earn a scholarship, go on to start at center. It was something that, taking a chance on myself at that point in my life, I knew it was going to set me up long-term because it was the experience that was going to set me up for a lifetime.
Yeah, man, that's so good. It's interesting that you talk about having the opportunity to take a less trying road, but you chose to do the hard thing. And so I'm interested to understand in making that decision, right? What were some of the lessons that you learned through your journey of getting to that starting spot?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, I think so many conversations that I had with my high school coaches, I think Coach Estep and Coach Donnelly, who were pretty much father figures for me throughout my high school career and still have a great relationship with them to this day. We had those conversations of like, what does it look like if you took the path that might be easiest on paper, or you take the path of where you ultimately want to be. They knew that Carolina was always my goal. They knew that putting on, that Carolina blue and the Jordan logo, that was the goal. And if this opportunity presented itself, we talked through at length, what type of work and dedication it would take just to even have a chance to sniff the field, let alone go on and play meaningful minutes. But it was one of those things that, the more we discussed it, and the person that I am internally, I was like, why would I settle for something when I know what my goals are and what I feel like I'm called to do? And it was a mix of both, great conversation with coaches, a lot of prayer, and then ultimately, taking that chance on yourself to, put yourself in these situations where you either have to produce or you're not touching the field.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, listen, it was something that I was talking to my older son about. He's one of the top, basketball players, whatever that means, right, in the
That's
city
awesome.
of Dallas. And so I had a conversation with him. I'm like, in your generation, it's all about like people moving to different places to be able to get more exposure, more exposure, more exposure.
Yep.
When we grew up, like maybe just because we didn't have that option, or the rules were a lot different, but we truly believe that your talent and your skill set level was going to get you all the exposure that you needed, right? And mastery of what it was that you were doing and being able to master the hard things and not run away from those things was going to be the perseverance and the tool set of adversity, and the adversity kit that you needed as you continue to elevate and step up, man. And I know nobody knows that better than you, but I am curious, man, like you have this opportunity to have everything, this free ride to go and do this
Yep.
at a different level, right? What is it about North Carolina for you? Like, what does North Carolina mean for you to where you said, nah, man, it's worth doing this?
Yeah, I think it goes back to my dad went to Carolina. He didn't play football there, but we spent every Saturday my entire childhood growing up going up to Kenan Stadium and cheering on the Tar Heels. So my love for the game started up there in Chapel Hill.
Mm,
And it was one of those things that the more that I thought about it and thought about where I wanted to take my football career, it was why wouldn't I want to go after something that I always dreamed of doing? And it was one of those hard conversations with my parents too, where it's like, this is the easy route of, let's take the money, let's take the scholarship offer from a smaller school, or do we take the chance here for North Carolina, not only for football, but I also knew the education at UNC
mm,
Chapel Hill was going to set me up for a lifetime.
mm,
And I made a promise to my parents before I headed off to Chapel Hill that, not only was I going to make them proud, but I was going to make sure I got more out of that university than they got out of me on the football
mm,
field, because I
mm.
wanted to set myself up beyond whenever football ended, because I knew that day would come. But I knew that Chapel Hill would not only set me up as a man on who I wanted to be, but also, the person that I wanted to be once the football career was over.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. I really want to shine light on what you said. Your thought process was, hey, I know at some point this game is going to end, right?
Yep.
Whatever that looks like. So I want to make sure that I get as much or get more out of this university than this university can get out of me. Man,
Yep.
that's such a awesome mentality to have. And to be honest, like if more athletes thought that way, a lot of the things that we see going on from a negative perspective for athletes post retirement, I believe those numbers would dwindle because it gives us a different thought process. And I guess for you, coming in, as a walk on and having to earn it, like that process was already embedded prior to you ever getting there. Like nobody's like, at this space, at that level, nobody's shining a light and saying, "Oh, you're the greatest. We need you," and all that. It's
Yep.
like, "Oh, we'll take you," until they realize, who you are, and like you have to prove yourself every single day.
Yeah. I,
Um,
I I
no, go
think
ahead.
like it's exactly to your point, right? It's
Mhm.
that mentality of you're walking into a room and you constantly have to prove that you belong yourself to be in that room.
Yeah.
And it's really like I think of the term like imposter syndrome, right? It's very easy to fall under that trap, especially when you're playing at that high of a level collegiately. But then
Mm,
also you're in the classroom with students that were valedictorians at their high school every single day, right? So the thing about Carolina that really helped me become the man that I am today was it was the ability to put myself in any situation, learn how to work alongside others, and make sure that, no matter what, I was confident in who I was and what I was able to bring to the table, because ultimately I knew I was there for a purpose, and my purpose was just only to better myself for the future.
mm, I love that. Well, that actually brings me to my next question. Like before we go to football, before we make the
Yep.
trips in the business space and we get to Austin, Texas, like who
Yep.
was Jonathan prior to the game?
Yeah, Jonathan prior to the game, was a kid that was trying to find his way, right?
Mm,
And it was interesting. I went to Charlotte Christian, as you mentioned, which was a smaller high school, graduating class of around 90 kids, right? So you can imagine it's smaller groups, right? And you kind of had to pick your lane. So football was able to give me that group that I felt most identified with, somebody that I could work alongside and work towards a unified goal as a purpose. But as a person, I'm the type of guy that that is always very goal driven. I always set out major goals for myself, and I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but man of faith too, where I know that God put me here for a reason, and my goal in life is to live for finding His purpose and His purpose for my life. So just it's a mixture of both things, right? Of like the people that I spent time around, and then ultimately the goals that I set out for myself.
nice. Yeah. Yeah. It's always interesting how environment shapes our mentality,
For
you
sure.
know. Now what happens is there's a paradigm shift depending on, where you go and the different experiences that you have. But being able to have a solid foundation, to me, I believe is like one of the pivotal moments of for success for any athlete. So in your situation, being in those smaller groups, man, it probably gave you more access. Do you think, like,
Yep.
to being able to have those one-on-one conversations with the leaders at that time?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's easy to, when you're in a bigger group, kind of fall to the back, but in those smaller circles, it kind of made you step up, right? And
Mm,
I took those learning lessons from high school, growing up, all the way to now when I was at Carolina, and then now post career in my work life of regardless of what room you're in and whatever the situation is, you need to step up as who you think that you're supposed to be called to be and the leader that you could be. And that's something that I really tried to take my pride in rather, over the years.
I'm processing. That's Yeah, that's good stuff, man. That's good stuff. Like man, it's just I believe for me, like we come from so many different walks of life,
Right.
but it's so interesting how in the sport of football specifically, love sports and all sports of any kind, but football specifically, man, it's so important the ability to be able to identify who you are as a person early, because then that helps you to identify who you are as a player,
Yep.
you know? So you being in those environments allowed you to see, okay, hey, look, this is what I'm cultivating. This is what I'm finding out. This is the identity exploration aspect of what I'm going through. So that now when I get to this other level, all of those experiences that I had prior to will be the thing that I lean on as I continue to elevate to the next level. Um, Here's a question that I have for you,
Yep.
because what you're talking about is ideally is you're talking about the journey, right?
Yep.
And some people saw the journey. They saw, the practices, the weight room, the film watching, the play on the field. They saw all of that, right? But what part of the journey that was there that you had to deal with that was extremely challenging that people didn't see?
Yeah, I think the first term that comes to mind was just the idea of becoming, comfortable with the uncomfortable. I
Mm,
think that's a having that mindset whenever you're taking on a new challenge, whether it's football, work, whatever it may be, right? You know that you're going to be put in situations that might push you in terms of things that you're just number one, not used to or not comfortable with or whatever it may be, right? But the ability of being comfortable in those situations and realizing that you have to pull from whatever it may be, your faith, your background, your experience in the past to get you through it,
mhm,
I think it goes a long way. And your question of asking of like, what are those things that when people, may not have seen besides the weight room, the practices, I think a lot of it goes back to mental, right? It's what's going on in between these two ears every
mm,
single day,
mm,
those doubts, those different things that might be clouding your brain of, am I supposed to be here? Am I good enough for this? It's having those internal battles daily and waking up and knowing that, like, number one, I'm here for a purpose. Number two, I'm here to help in some capacity, whatever it may be. And once you're able to get through those, internal battles, it sets you up for whatever comes and life throws your way.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. It's I often like so I coach athletes like a life coach
Yeah.
situation, and so more as a mentor. And one of the things that we talk about is the thing that the lies that are going on between the ears, right?
Yep.
I'm not good enough. I can only do this thing. I don't, or this is the biggest one. I don't know how. Like, listen, man, look, bro. When we touched down on this planet, we didn't know how to walk. We didn't know how to
Yep.
talk. We didn't know how to tie a shoe, right? But what happened is we didn't allow us not knowing to not
Yep.
go and figure it out. And so one of the one of the biggest crutches that athletes hold on to is having to go and sit with the unknown,
Yep.
right? Like what happens next? That's a fear. And it's always interesting because when you look at these guys, right? Some of the most athletic, the strongest dudes, 4'3", benching 440, but like, man, when you put life in the mix,
Yep.
it's like they shrink, and
Yep.
it's just because of the, again, and my from my studies, it's just from the aspect of you not doing things outside of your sport to understand that there's more to life. Like I often tell guys, like, you understand, like a college, I can hear myself, my speech person that I talk
Yep.
to all the time, my communication person always talks to me about the word like, right? um, I guess that's my crutch, that's my
Yeah,
word
hey, we all have
crutch.
them.
But you understand that college attendees have a longer career span than professional athletes in the NFL space,
Yep.
right? So even if you're somebody that 2X that, which is, it's around 3 to 4 years. So if you 2X that, 3X that, play 8, 12, even 15 years, whatever, that's a sprint as it pertains to your life mass in the
Yep.
career space. You still have 40, 50, 60 years of life left when you retire. Like, we have to move into a space to where we start to understand, hey, I'm very tuned into the game. I appreciate everything the game is giving to me. When it's time to do things that require me to be locked into this is what
Yep.
I'm going to do. But we got to start looking at, the aspect of what else, right? And I
Right.
believe that the earlier you start to ask yourself those questions, the better the results are for you on the back end.
For sure. And I think, I didn't get the chance to play for him. I know you did. Mac
Mm.
Brown, both
Oh,
Texas and UNC legend.
yeah.
There's a big sign when you walk into Keenan's football facility now, where it's not a 4-year decision, it's a 40-year decision, right?
Buddy.
And it's
Mm.
that type of mindset that I know Mac Brown instilled into his players. Larry Fedora was my coach. He did the same thing for us too, of really looking out for their guys, that when that day comes, right, and it's going to come for anybody, even if you are a Hall of Fame vet in the NFL, at some point you're going to have to hang up those cleats.
Yeah.
Number one, who are you as a person without football? And number two, what are you going to do after that as well, right? And it was one of those great conversations, and you really work alongside your brothers in the locker room and in these different areas of life, of trying to identify that, because it's inevitable for everybody, but how you handle it and how you individually go and attack every single day, I mean, it's very different. You see it across the locker room, how people address it.
Yeah. And it's important to have the conversations within the locker room about, hey,
For
what
sure.
what else, what does life look like outside of this? Those
Yep.
conversations are important. Like, I know for me growing up, it was like always taboo. You want to
Yep.
make sure, hey, like, we're tied in 100%, give it all. There, nothing else matters but this. And it's like, bro, that's not accurate.
Yep. Yep.
That's just not accurate, and it's setting people up for failure. One of the things that I know, because you played on the offensive line, which is how you and I connected
Yep.
at the athletes touch event. And so as an offensive lineman, man, the only time we get our name called is if we, miss a block.
Yep.
All right.
My
Miss an
snaps are
assignment.
above the quarterback's
Yeah,
head or
if
something.
you
Yep.
snaps above the quarterback's
Yep.
head and get somebody crushed, right? But
Yep.
at the same time, the beauty of that is, like, our space is about, it's about protection, man. It's
Yep.
about doing what's best for the team. You know what I mean? So what do you believe that the position taught you about discipline and service and sacrifice and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I truly credit who I am as a person around the foundation that like of what an offensive lineman is. I think back to, when I started playing football, I started playing football for the first time in middle school. And when they're like, all right, you're a bigger guy, not too fast. I think you'd be a good offensive lineman. In your head, you're like, no, I want the ball. I want to be the guy, throwing the ball, quarterback, give me the rock. But
Yeah.
learning from an early age and then through high school and college that number one, you're better as a unit. Those five guys across, like that is such a valuable life lesson. But then number two, the ability to understand that you're working for somebody else's success. And like to your point, like at no point is an offensive lineman name's going to be up in lights or on the scoreboard or anything like that. But every single play, your job is to either protect, look out, or make sure that your guys get to that next goalpost or whatever it may be, right? And it's such a valuable lesson in terms of, now in my business career of I don't need to be the guy constantly getting the pat on the back or, having the name up in lights. I'm cool with doing the dirty work because I know what the end goal is. And I do really credit playing offensive line, working in the trenches to, giving me that mindset that I carry today.
Man, yeah, it's nothing like it, bro. Like it's so interesting too because I came from a background of getting the ball as a tight end.
Yep.
Like you move in and like, oh, you're gonna be an offensive lineman. It's like, oh, bro, like I want the ball. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
come
But
on.
like it was the best decision that I could have ever made, man, because it really gives you a different understanding of like the team concept and camaraderie. You could be one of the best offensive linemen on the unit. But if the rest of the guys aren't up to par and aren't doing what needs to be done on a consistent basis, we don't go anywhere as a team.
Yep.
So for me, as a leader, as you get older in the space as a leader, now it's not just about you knowing what you need to do. Now you need to help your guys get to a level that they may not have even been able to see for themselves. And like I understand with you being in business, that's
Yep.
huge. Being able to take people and to put a mirror up to them and show, hey, this is where you are now, but I want to help you get to a place to where you want to go, right?
Yep.
And offensive line play, man, is one of the best spaces to be able to do that.
Yep.
At what point did you realize football had built something in you, but it was not going to be the whole story of your life?
Yeah, I think once I got to Carolina, and I think of that quote, everybody has a plan until they get smacked in the mouth,
No,
right?
Tyson.
Like, yep, like
Yeah,
Tyson, come on.
yeah.
Like that freshman year, that freshman training camp, you're like, oh, this is not just high school ball anymore, right? Like this is a different level, and that was a big wake up call for me, right? That like you go from one area of life where you think that you're the man, and then you get to that college level and you realize what the real man looks like, right? And you
Mhm.
have to either become that or you're not touching the field. Like it was one of those moments that you start realizing, number one, all right, this game is going to be fleeting and it's going to end eventually, but also I need to realize that like I can't just have my entire identity in this game
Yeah.
because it's not going to always go perfectly. I'm not going to have undefeated seasons every year. I'm not going to have great every one-on-one reps every single day, right? I have to find my identity beyond all this because if I get wrapped up in that, then I'm a shell of who I actually should be and who I'm called to be. So I really think it was that freshman year at Carolina is when I started realizing that I had to really identify myself beyond the game.
Mm.
And I credit our chaplain at UNC, Mitch Mason, who is an incredible man. He really helped me, not only take a step back and realize, number one, what I'm called to do and what I'm called to be, but also like, what am I doing it for? Right. And whether
Mm.
it's football, work, school, whatever it may be, like, what is it for? And, and I really credit him on helping me become the man that I am today.
Man, that's so big. Um, obviously, people go to my sites and all that type of stuff. They see stuff,
Yep.
but I wrote a book, "What to Do When It's Done." This was sitting back here, and
Yep.
in that book, I talk about a framework called clarity to creation. And one of the pillars in the clarity to creation framework or sequence is awareness, right? Being able to identify where you are in this particular moment, you know, what does that trajectory look like? And then also where you want to go, right?
Yep.
And then also being aware, like you were, of a situation of the situation and saying, I'm going to do the best that I possibly can in this space, but there is a possibility that all of this can end right here, right?
Yep.
There might
Yep.
not be an elevated space for me, and that's okay. So when I'm locked into my space, I'm locked into my space. But when I put that away, I'm able to put that to the side
Yep.
and go and do what's called identity exploration. Figure out who I am, whose I am, and who I serve, so that I can now start to align my true purpose. Because I tell a lot of my the young guys that I talk to, I'm like, you know the song Pushing P. I said a lot of you guys are pushing the wrong P. Y'all are
Mhm.
thinking that football is your purpose when it's really just your platform.
Yep. Yep.
It's just your platform, man. It's what you do. It's not who you are, right? So that's good, man. To hear like the alignment in
Yep. For
the
sure.
thought process. Yeah.
And to that point too, I've always heard, football is the vehicle of where your life is going, right? It's going to give you a jump start and a head start into so many avenues and connections and
Yeah.
opportunities, right? Just because of I was able to put that Carolina jersey on my,
Right.
on and the helmet on, but it's going to open up so many doors for you. So taking advantage of those moments and in those moments of, every person you can meet, really to not only broaden your opportunities later in life, but use that vehicle that you've worked so hard for to
Mhm.
set you up long term, beyond whenever the game is over.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, in your case, man, I mean, you ever run into Julius Peppers, y'all already have a locked in, a locked in point. Like y'all have a place of
Exactly.
agreement. You run into
Yep.
Michael Jordan. If you ever get a chance to talk to him, there's a place of agreement. So it's like
Yep.
you understand that being associated with these universities gives
Yep.
you a leg up and an opportunity if you understand how to connect the pieces and connect the dots, But
Yep.
that goes back to what we're talking about, having that awareness and that design of purpose.
So I think it's so cool. I think one of the things that Carolina football does well is we got even like a LinkedIn group, right, of former NFL or excuse me, former UNC football players. And it's
Mm,
so interesting if you just scroll through that. There's guys in every single walk of life in every single career, post football, right? You have lawyers, dentists, doctors, people in sales like myself. But that was really eye opening for me when I was, an underclassman at Carolina, joining groups like that, and being able to visualize what my life could look like 10 years from now,
mm.
15 years from now, just because of the opportunities presented to myself. And being able to not only visualize that, but connect with those guys, I think helped me become, who I am today and open up the opportunities. So any, young guy getting into college or trying to figure out that next step, I would really take a step back and look at the guys that have done it before you, because a lot of times there's a path that you can either, follow along, or they can give you some type of head start so that you're able to set yourself up.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Success leaves clues,
Yep.
and it's based off of principle. So if you're able to identify somebody in that group that you're like, you know what, that particular individual is moving similarly to how I would like to move, I probably need to, you know, shadow that person or
For
follow
sure.
that person or connect with that individual to see what are the steps that they took to get to where they are and how can
Yep.
I get there and go even further. I believe it was actually I heard Michael Jackson say this. He said they asked him, some of the principles of life, and this one stuck with me. He said, "Study the greats
Mm.
and then become greater." I was like, "Wow,
I love
that's a
that.
different mentality." Study the greats and then become greater. That's a different mentality. So that would be something also based off of what you're saying, that if when the younger generation is watching this, that would be something to take hold of, to hold
For
on to
sure.
that gym, right?
Yep.
Um,
I mean, the blueprint's already out there, right? And it's use that to your advantage so that you're not caught without like understanding what could be next. But use that to your advantage so you're ready for whatever next door opens, and then it's your time to perform and produce.
so you get to the space to where, you know, the game ends, right?
Yep.
So we you have this high. So let's talk about the high. The high is you work your tail off, man. You get to your senior year and you become a starter. Like
Yep.
you're like the guy that nobody saw or nobody looked for. Was now, and not only a starter, you were the starting center. right? So you're the first point of contact to the most important thing that everybody out there on that football field is wanting. Is that's the football setting fronts and ID and linebackers and doing all of the things. Like even me talking about it now, like being removed from the college game for a while. I'll just say that I ain't gonna give my age away, right? But like, and I have memorabilia all in my house, like right up here and stuff like that about what that felt like. Man, that is an exhilarating feeling to play in front of thousands of fans. Can you talk about that transition of working so hard and grinding so hard to get to this point, what that felt like? And then the second part of this question is now it's removed because the season is over and you're in your quiet season. How was that for you? So the contrast between the two.
Yeah. I think, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question was just noise, right? It was constantly clouded in my head of like, what do I need to do right now to get the scholarship, get coach's attention, be given that opportunity? And that senior year when I was offered that scholarship and, it was announced the starter going into that game against East Carolina, I remember it vividly that everything got quiet right then, right? Because I had just been clouding myself with just all this self-doubt and self-hate in some situations of like, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get it. But finally it happened. And not only was I able to play free because I, accomplished such a great goal, but it was honestly one of the happiest and greatest moments of my life in those few seasons, that last season there, of just being able to go out there with my brothers and give it my all and finally get to prove and showcase everything that I had worked towards. So it was such a incredible moment. But to your point, I remember our last game my senior year, we're playing NC State, who I hate more than anything. And
rival school.
the worst. And, it comes down to a last minute Hail Mary. We go into overtime. I remember being on the 5-yard line. We're going in trying to score, and we ended up just not making it. And then next thing I know, I look up and there's a bench clearing fight on both sides. And this is just common for North Carolina NC State rivalry. And I kind of step back. I'm usually the guy that would want to jump into that and, be a part of the mix, but that was it. My football career was over, and I'm just watching this like chaos ensue right in front of me. And I'm like, it was such a weird moment. And I vividly remember just standing there, just like watching it all go down. That like 5 years of college football, everything my growing up just ended right there. And then this craziness is happening. And then I just feel this guy, like a hand on my shoulder. And I turned around, and it was one of my best friends in high school, Garrett Bradbury, who was actually the center for NC State. And he just turned around and we just like hugged each other. So I wish there's a picture out there. And then in some world, right, there's all of NC State, UNC fighting, and then me and my boy just giving each other one last hug.
I share the love, man.
And I think it's, it's a good like visual image of what football was to me, right? It's chaos, but then just finding the peace and the love for the game in the middle of it. And, your guys from high school, your guys in the locker room. That's really what that moment was. But then, to your point, once that, we went in the locker room one last time, it was, I still get emotional thinking about it, right? It's like, all right, it's over. Now what? And it was kind of scary.
Yeah, man, that is so good. Like the chaos and then the peace that comes from, that chaos, and that's life. There's a Bible verse that says that when thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation, make not haste in time of trouble, but constantly endure. Right. And so what I get from that is like, hey, man, like adversity is coming. Adversity is coming. Don't run from it. Right. Endure it. And that's what football teaches us. The game teaches us that. And that quality is one of the main qualities that I hope that this platform draws out for guys that have played these games at these levels and now have moved on in the transitional phase, right? A lot of guys when they retire, they're locked into that I call it the wilderness phase, right? So
Yep.
like there's a retirement, there's the wilderness, and then there's the promised land, right? And in the wilderness phase, this is where, man, this is a cultivating moment. This is a dark thing. This is, figuring out who I am outside of the game and what do I do now? Dismantling the pride and the ego that comes from
Yep.
being an athlete because you've been told how great you are, or or like you were able to get to a particular moment. So there can be some like, hey man, like I know I'm here
Yep.
now. Like I'm the starter now. Look where I came from. And there's all of that. And we have to dismantle that to figure out who we are underneath. For that transition period for you, what were some of the lessons that you took from those dark moments, and how were you able to cultivate it into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think so. Right after I got done playing, it was all right. Time, time to grow up. Time to go get a paycheck. Time to find that next step for me.
Yeah.
And I looked again once to my teammates and the guys that were doing well. And my roommate through college and moved down here to Austin. Dante DiMaggio, he was one of our wide receivers at Carolina, and he was working at Oracle in tech sales. Did I ever think I would be working in tech sales in Austin, Texas? No shot. But, I knew if my brother was doing it and he seemed to be doing well,
Yeah.
I think it was like, okay, this could be an opportunity for me too. So I ended up interviewing there and, jumped into it. And the cool thing about sales and the business world is that competitive mindset that it defined me my entire life in football. I was able to translate that over to football. So that aspect of like feeling like I'm working towards something and a goal every day,
Mm,
that was easy to replace because it was the new goal, right?
yeah.
And that's how I've always operated. But the actual change of who I was as a person, that is where I struggled, right? It
Yeah.
was once I got off of work, it was those nights alone where you're like, what am I doing? Who am I? I remember that first year, it was very hard for me to even watch a game of football after
Mm,
because it was, like, okay, that's gone. And that was me, but it's no longer me, and ultimately what I had to do is just throw myself into it. And I coached at helped out as a volunteer coach here at in a high school team, Westlake, which ended up winning that state championship that year. They're a great team here, but being able to throw myself into that situation and start giving back to the next generation was a healing process for me too, because it was
mm,
no longer me running away from who I used to be, but I saw myself and that kid right across from me, whoever that center was, and being like, I can see what you're struggling with, how I can help you. I've been here before, and try to pass it on. I think that's really how I coped with that transition phase.
Oftentimes, what I've come to discover in this thing called life is the best way to deal with the problems that we have sometimes can be to help others deal with their problems,
Mm,
because it allows us to take the focus off of ourselves and that self-pity that we might
yep,
have, and the negative thought processes, and to move more into a positive space of being able to help others. And who knows, maybe the person that you're helping, locked inside of them, has the answers to the problems that you're dealing with, and
for
it's your
sure.
job to help them get there, right? Which comes back to the team process that we talked about. So you transition from ball to business, and you talk about those different skill sets, communication, trust, relationship building, consistency. Um, what parts of being an athlete and those skill sets of being an athlete translate to business for you now, that helps you to be such a good salesperson like you've been these past few years?
Yeah, I think number one, just the ability to be coached, right?
Mm,
Anybody that can walk in the room and not act like they know everything right out of the gate, you're going to earn trust from the people around you. Like I'm one of those people that I'm constantly trying to, like we talked about earlier, learn from the greats and learn from those who've succeeded before me.
mhm,
And I think taking that ability that we've instilled into us as athletes of show me the way, coach me just one time, and I'm going to run with it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's something I've really tried to do with my work life of, being coachable, asking the questions, asking for feedback. It set me up in the long term to be the best version of myself.
Mhm.
But then I think another thing that, comes natural for athletes in the business world is just the ability to be dependable, right? You give me a goal, you give me a task, you're not going to have to worry about me not completing that. And that's something that I take pride in because that's who I am at my core of you give me something, you can trust that you don't have to look back once. It's going to be taken care of. And I think that goes back to being an offensive lineman,
Yeah.
being a football player of I've been given goals and tasks before where I don't need, to be babysitted on this. You just need to trust that I'm going to get it across the finish line when needed to be.
Yeah. Because of the simple fact that being, like you talked about, playing the position that you played,
Yep.
you can't afford to have mistakes, man. Your miss ID or the misalignment of the defense for not just the offensive line, but that's for the quarterback's hot read, the running back's pickup, the receiver's sights. Like you making sure that everything that the picture is painted the right way so that people can all see it. That was a very high pressurized situation. So now when
Yep.
you get into the business world, you're able to translate that and say, hey, look, I don't need you to hover over me, right? I need you to
Yep.
give me the mission. And as the warrior-minded individual that I am, I'm going to go get the task done.
Yep.
So that gives you wonderful insight for my next question, because now you've been on both sides of this thing. You've been as the prominent D1 athlete and now in the business space. When you think about athletes today, what are the things that you're seeing that the athlete is not prepared for moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a general problem in our world today. It feels like is just distractions, right?
Mm,
And I'm still helping out with high school kids these days. And it's the ability to lock in on one thing and one thing alone. It's hard for anyone. I know I struggle with it daily,
yeah,
especially with my phone blowing up every single moment of the day and everything that you could be thrown your way. But right now, what I'm seeing with like younger athletes is there's so much noise happening externally from whatever's going on internally too. So being able to work through both of those things of that's just external noise. I have to work through it to get to where I want to be. But then also being in check with what's going on internally within you. I think that's going to set up the good athletes from the great, right? The ones that are able to, close out the noise and just focus in on whatever the task is at hand.
minimize the distractions so that you can
Yep.
lock in and focus on the task. That makes so much sense. Yeah. Now,
Yep.
like they have more distractions than we did growing up.
For sure. For
They have
sure.
so much access to knowledge and the world than we ever
Yep.
did. Like there was no way, like when we grew up, yeah, we had Facebook. It just popped off, you feel me? But like these kids today, they can literally go on their phone, click an app, and be exposed to so many different things
Yep.
that don't align with what it is that they're doing. I want to remember who it was. There was this one athlete. He talked about how he got off. So, oh no, I know what it was. It was the first round pick, Fernando Mendoza.
Fernando. Yeah. Yep.
He only has a LinkedIn profile,
Checks out.
right?
Yep.
It does, but think about all that he's accomplished, because his story,
Yep.
he had to get it out the mud too. He of course he was at Cal and all of that, like, but it was a different way that he had to do it to becoming a national champion. Well, first of all, a
Yep.
leader of a new team and proving that point and changing that program around, and then now becoming a national champion and then a first round pick. And I can only imagine it's his ability to focus on the
Yep.
thing that is the most important in the moment that has allowed him to have success. So there you have a blueprint of what it is that you're
For
saying.
sure. For sure. And by no means am I saying that, there's so much positive that can come with social media too. In
Mm-hmm,
this NIL world that we're in today, one
mm-hmm.
thing I'm really passionate about is helping those offensive linemen build that profile for themselves,
Yeah.
build that platform to put themselves in a position so that they are marketable to these different NIL opportunities. So, I mean, that's incredible. But I think at the end of the day, like you're saying, it might not need to be like a cold cut of no social media, but it's let's figure out how I can use all these different incredible angles that I have access to now to then point towards whatever the goal and mission is. And what I'm seeing right now is like the athletes that are able to do that and really be able to focus and keep the main thing are ultimately going to be the best ones out there.
Yeah, making sure that you put parameters around it. You know, maybe you say
Yep.
from this time to this time I'm on it, and then boom, after that I'm
Yep.
good with it. Because you have to be able. I hear you. Like that's like people that don't want to be implemented into AI in business.
Right. Right.
You can
It's
fight
every day.
against it if you want to, but
Yep.
this is the way of the world. You have to understand how to operate within it. It's the same
Yep.
thing for the athlete as it pertains to making sure that you're using social media. Like you know what? Bringing you what you said back,
Yep.
that you're going to get more out of social media than what social media is going to get out of you, you know?
Sure.
So
For
that's
sure.
that. So that's that aspect. Um, so when you look at your life now, I understand because I've heard you say it a couple of times, and that faith in God is really big in your life. You have the business, you have relationships, the podcast,
Yep.
where you're doing an excellent job at that. You know,
Appreciate
so
that.
it's the Trench podcast, right?
Yep, Trench Talent on
Trench Talent,
Instagram.
yeah,
And then, yeah, our podcast is Trench Talk.
that's
So we're
right.
talking all things offensive line. And our next episode dropping is with the Tony Hills.
Man, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate the plug. No,
Yep.
but my the reason that I wanted to bring that up, and we'll definitely talk about that, is that you're seemingly building
Yep.
outside of the sports world. But when it comes to intentionality, what are you intentionally building now
Yep.
in this new space that you're operating in?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year for me, and I'll date myself. I turned 30 in March, right? And it was one of those reflection periods for myself of, all right, that decade was some incredible moments of ending of football and then my life after. And what do I want this next decade to look like? I got married earlier this year, so priority number one, and I know she'll
Congratulations, my
appreciate
man.
this whenever she listens, is Kennedy. She's my number one priority at this moment, right?
Mm,
And working towards our future family. So diversifying what I'm putting my time into and my efforts, it's all about building not only for her, but also for the kingdom, for God, right? Those are my
mm.
two main priorities right now, is building for our future family and continuing to build upon what I think God's called me to do.
Absolutely. No, I love that,
Yep.
man. And shout out to Kennedy, man. Congratulations.
Yep.
And this brother definitely outkicked his coverage. I've seen his wife. All right.
I
So,
appreciate
so
that.
absolutely.
Appreciate that. Yes,
Absolutely.
I did.
Well, I want to ask, we have our signature question, Jonathan. And before I
Let's
ask
do
you,
it.
man, I want to say, man, I appreciate you for taking the time and sharing, man, such a wonderful journey of what it is that you've been able to accomplish and bringing those gems and that awareness to the platform and to the space, because I know the things that you've been able to go through and grow through, and your mind and how it works and what you're building, I know it's going to help so many of these guys, man. I've been studying this thing called the athlete identity foreclosure, and it is some scary stuff, man. It really is. It's going into, you know, depression and suicide and heart failures and all types of stuff that's going on within the space. And so, hearing somebody like yourself that has gone through this process and has seemingly found some success is just one more notch on the belt to say, hey, look, guys, there's life after this game. And there's some wonderful life after this game, right?
Yep.
But the question goes like this. So when the arena goes quiet, what part of you remains that the game could never take? And what are you building with it now?
That's a good one. Yeah, I think I go back to exactly that moment when the arena went quiet, right? It's sitting in the locker room after that last game, senior day against NC State. And the one thing that I kept on drawing from was just the ability to overcome things, right? And no matter what life throws my way, I knew that throughout my time at Carolina, I was able to overcome and persevere through whatever life was thrown at me. And that is something that, from that moment on into my business career, into now building a family and building a life, where I am today, It's no matter what life throws at me, I know that I'm going to be able to persevere and keep moving and moving forward. So my challenge and my thing to any athlete listening to this is, there's other athletes that have been there before. We've been in your shoes, whatever it may be you're going through. Just keep tracking, because you're here for a reason, and whatever you're continuing to work towards, it's going to be incredible to be a part of.
Man, listen, I couldn't have said it any better, man. I agree 1,000%. I agree
Appreciate
1,000%. Well, Jonathan, listen, before we get out of here, I always want to give my guests an opportunity to plug anything that they're doing. We talked about, Trench Talent. Would love for you to
Yep.
talk about that and where people can find you. And we'll have stuff in the description and everything, but go ahead and do your
Appreciate
thing.
that. Yeah. If y'all want to follow Trench underscore talent, it is a social media platform built specifically for offensive linemen. So we're giving the big boys the highlights that earlier we weren't talking that we didn't get in the past. So we're posting edits, different tips around NIL training, and then we have a podcast. We've had the opportunity to interview one of the greats, Joe Thomas, on there, and just learn from offensive linemen that have done it at the highest level, and helping that next generation of offensive line talent. So give us a follow there, and we'd be happy to connect with you.
Love it. Love it. And listen, so, man, like I tell you, man, this thing just keeps growing and getting better and better, man. Jonathan has blessed us with some amazing information. And I'll say this, if you are an athlete that's struggling in the space of identity foreclosure, not understanding who you are, purpose alignment, anything of that nature, or if you're just somebody that's in the space, but you're still trying to find yourself, I want you to go to the Quiet Arena podcast, and I want you to join the Athlete Circle. It's a community where we've been able to bring in people like Jonathan and all these other business gurus and mental coaches and everything else, right? Complimentary, to be able to give you guys all of the options that you need. So go to the quietarenapodcast.com. Obviously, we have resources there. What to do when it's done is there for you guys as well. But at the end of the day, this is about you understanding that you are bigger than the game. So with that being said, appreciate you guys for tuning in. It's your man, Tony the Tycoon. We out.
Living legend, lethal weapon, mastermind, never tried, tell 'em all.